I'm Abby, and I am here today because, quite frankly, I am bored. So we've been in lockdown now for about 4 months, and where I live, which is the Manchester area, we've just entered a local lockdown. Now, it's a little unclear what that means. I think it kind of means that if I want to go to my friend or family's house, I can't do that. But what I can do is still go to a pub or a restaurant, and if that person that I wanted to go and see happens to be in the same pub or restaurant, that's okay, but I can't arrange to meet them there, I think. In lockdown, I have been picking up a few new hobbies. So I've been tie-dyeing pretty much everything I own. I have been doing resin art. I have been eating everything in the house, which is becoming a bit of an issue because the only trousers I own now, I think, are the PJs. And so that's an issue. But one of the fun ones that I've done, like I said, is resin. Because I've not been doing resin very long, I thought that it'd be cool to kind of video my journey with it. You can watch me fail at things. I can pass on any hints and tips that I learn along the way. That's what this video is. This is a video on the things that I wish that I had known when I started doing resin, and things that I wish I had listened to. So buckle up for that. Tip number 1. So tip number 1 is read the damn label. There are a lot of different kind of resins out there, and I'm not going to go into like the difference between a clear cast resin and things like that for you. There are a couple of things that I would advise that you look out for. The first one is how you're supposed to mix the resin. There'll be the ratio, so that'll be for your part A and part B. So that'll be like, might be 1:1. So the first type of resin I got was a 1:1 ratio. I unpacked it and was really excited and was like, right, I'm going to start doing resin straight away because that's all I do. I measured out my resin, did my pieces and things like that, and after the curing time, I demolded them and they were still bendy. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe the resin that I've gotten might take a little longer than the 24 hours to set. So I left it for 48 hours and the pieces were still a little bendy. Not massively, just a little, and they were quite sensitive to heat as well. I tried to make coasters, and if you had a brew on it, the resin got a bit bendy again. I was like a little confused about this, but I didn't reread the instructions. I just continued to do what I thought was right, which was measuring things out by weight. So for every 100 grams of part A, I was measuring out 100 grams of part B. Now, when I realised that might not be the way that I needed to do it was towards the end of the resin, I found I had about 250 millilitres of part B left. Now, these things aren't shipped, so you have extra of one or the other. You are given the right amount of resin, like the right amount of part A and part B to make the advertised amount of resin on the packet. So I go back to the website and I go, right, so something's wrong here. Like, I checked and it was 1:1 ratio by volume. What that means is for every 100 millilitres of part A, I need to add 100 millilitres of part B because they must weigh different. And basically I ended up wasting about 50 pounds worth of resin because I didn't read the instructions. The second thing you need to look for in terms of the label, your pot life. So your pot life is the amount of usable time you have with your resin once you've mixed part A and part B together. So once you've put part A and part B in your cup, mix them up, that is how much time you have before the resin gets to a point where it is too cured to do anything with. So it might mean that it's too thick for it to get into like more detailed molds, or it might be if you're doing alcoholic kind of petri dish, these kinds of things, that the alcohol inks won't drop through the resin. the final thing to check out is cure time. So cure time is the amount of time that you have until your piece is fully set and ready to be demolded. Now, you can demold things earlier. I wouldn't suggest you do, because it can still warp if it's still a little soft. It might warp around something if you don't put it on a level surface. It might also stick to your brand new £700 IKEA table, so you have to chisel it off with a knife. Number 2. This one applies to the world in general at the moment, but definitely when you're dealing with resin, and that is wear a mask. So when dealing with resin, you need a mask like this. Now this is, I have the packaging here actually, it came today, and this is a gas, vapor and particulate. So it's a gas, vapor and particulate respirator, which means that none of the fumes when I do resin are going to get through this. Now, they're not particularly attractive, but they are actually quite comfortable. Well, this one is anyway. I got this from Resin8, and they are a UK based resin company. They sell resin, safety equipment, glitters, things like that. Cost me £45. So they're not cheap, but they're also, it's not a one-use thing. Like, that's going to last me for a while. So definitely pick up a good mask. Tip 3. Now that is invest in a good white alcohol ink. So the one that generally everybody uses is this one, Power of Magic, which is the Jacquard Pinata alcohol ink. I'll show you a bit of a comparison. So when I first started doing resin, I ordered a cheap set of alcohol inks off eBay, and I will do a proper video on this next time. These are some of the first pieces that I did. So, I don't know if you can, it's kind of just reflecting a bit too much. So can you see there? It's not really pulling through. So that's the back side. So that's the side that I poured on. And then what you're supposed to have are these drops that pull the colour through. So it's not done that. It's kind of just gone dead mudded. I'll show you another one as well. So again, that's the side I poured on. And that is kind of it. I mean, I would say that looks really muddy on camera, but that's actually how it looks in real life as well. They're not brilliant. They're not what you want. Really, I think if you're doing alcohol inks and things like that, you want something like this. Which is that focusing a bit better? So you can see all the alcohol ink has actually reached through down to the surface there. You can see it all pulling through here. So that's the side I poured on. That's the final side there. So I'll show you a couple of others. The fact that I used the Pinata white ink. Like I said, next video I will do a proper side-by-side comparison between some proper alcohol inks and the cheap ones you can get off Amazon. Tip 4. Cats and resin don't mix. In fact, resin and any kind of small creature or small human don't mix. So if you are doing resin in a room that you normally use, say such as your living room or your kitchen, because that's the only space that you have to work at where you've got a table that you can sit down at, you're going to want an area you can take your resin out to afterwards. Now, what I would suggest doing is investing in some cheap chopping boards. So like these here. You can put your mould on those, pour your resin, and then when you want to move it, you can just pick up the chopping board and move it. What that means is you're not pulling at the sides of your mould and disturbing your resin pieces, because that might mess up the pattern that you've done. Or you might even get resin on your hands, which you do not want resin on your hands, trust me. It's like getting caramel on you, but you can't lick it off. I mean, you can. Don't lick it off. The last one isn't necessarily I guess it's a tip. It was useful for me, so it might be useful for you as well. Now, stand containers like this, and generally you'll get wooden mixing sticks like this. The issue with this, I'll come a bit closer to the camera, is if I put that in there, you can kind of see there's a gap around the side, which means that it could leave resin, like part A and part B, that aren't incorporated together. So what I do is just, and get your scissors. These got resin on them. I've managed to stick my scissors together with resin. I'll be right back. Okay, got some more scissors. So take your scissors and you just cut off that bit there, cut it flat. You can then actually get into the corners with your stick properly and things like that, and actually get it properly on, like, full contact on the bottom as well. You've not just got the little dome. Now obviously that only works if you are using, like, I say single use, you can reuse these, but let's just, for the purpose of this, call these single use containers and stirrers. Now if you get into resin properly and you decide this is something that I want to do on a regular basis, I want to make resin pieces, this is my hobby, this is something that I really enjoyed doing, I want to do more of it, then I would absolutely invest in something like this. So this is a silicone measuring jug. It's got the marks up the side so I can do by volume, but I can also use these to measure and use them by weight. So I've got a couple of these big ones and a couple of the smaller ones, and I've got a silicone mixing wand. Now again, I have a few of these just in case I'm doing multiple batches in a day, because what you don't want to do is, say if I've used this about 2 hours ago to stir some resin together, I don't want to then put this, without it being clean, into a new set of resin, because that partially set resin is going to set the rest of the resin off quicker. What I will do is, I got all this stuff off Amazon. I will link things down below. I'll even link some of my favourite moulds and things like that, like some good starter ones too, and these are just recommendations, these are just the things that I tend to use. I think that's all for this video. I scripted some of these bits, some of them I didn't. But what I didn't do is write down how I was going to end this. So, bye.